Okay, we'll get started. Can we get started? You guys seems very happy. That's a good thing. How's the midterm, I guess? I mean, well, it seems fair. Everyone says it's a fair on the poll. So, um, well, the reason I wanted to divide it into two, one just to see your basic Selenium understanding, right? And then also, can we still figure out a way to solve those tedious problems like find duplicates, find this, sum of two values equals to like these are exercises that's like endless. Like there is like so many of them. You just have to train your brain to kind of you know deal with how to use loop in an array. That's all that is, right? We've done a lot of those during the break, I think, right, when we had that little break, and then now it's always going to come back. Even if you go to some interviews, they will ask you similar type of question, not exactly. Um, in fact, I asked this one today to one of the interviewers, so because I set it up for you guys, and he couldn't answer it, and uh, he was a senior guy, so that's why we can't hire him. But like I understand someone like early stage not able to answer these, but someone who is saying they're senior, it's not fair, right? Because then the junior goes, "What is this? Am I making $60,000 less because I don't know this?" Um, but most importantly, I just want you to understand this is kind of as real as it gets. Like I know you might feel like, "Oh, is it more? Is it some?" No, this is exactly how I operate in real um, company. So if you're able to do this stuff, I mean, I think I just don't see how you don't get a job. Um, but most importantly, you have to understand fundamentally what's going on, right? And we're just going to quickly go over this, share this answer with you. You can review it. As far as all the homework questions, right? Deepak is working on to create the solution for each one of those. So he'll share it with everyone, and you can compare what you have to what he has, right? And based on that, we can take it from there. So make sure you review all of the solution. The reason we don't like to give you a lot of the solution early on, because then you stop trying, right? I mean, when you look at it, you're gonna be like, oh, that's it. That it's a joke, right? So you rather practice. I just want you guys to continuously practice, and you guys are doing good. So it's not like you're not doing well or anything like that, but you have to continuously um, do that. So today's plan is first we'll review this real quick. Then I'll introduce you WebDriver wait functionality. You know how we having the thread.sleep and all that crap? We're gonna get rid of those. Put a wait, like something more dynamic wait, right? So it's not like 2 seconds or 3 seconds. It kind of just knows, checks for an element every few milliseconds, and if it's available, it gives you back, and then we can have a threshold where it hits the max value, like 15 seconds, and then throw an error, right? So we'll do that, and how we actually incorporate that into our base page. So our base page is going to change a little bit, right? Because we have to add this functionality into all of our actions. Because every time we deal with web elements, we need to deal with wait, right? And where do we deal with web elements? In base page, right? Click, send key. So we have to wrap this around all of our functions. All right. So that's kind of the second part. The third part I would like to get introduced with Cucumber today. And there'll be, for homework, you have a lot of reading materials that you're going to read over. And then when you come back next class, we are going to take our existing framework and dump Cucumber top of it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you, you can kind of use, these are a lot of actions, right? So make sure you don't throw this stuff away. But I'm going to give you like a new framework. And I am thinking to maybe teach you GitHub now, right? So we can start pushing code into cloud and just share just the link instead of the entire project over and over, which is kind of tedious. But so I guess the next Thursday we're going to start with maybe GitHub first, and then get you, up to date with Cucumber, walk you through, maybe do a little bit of a regex, right? So all those things will get you set up with the framework, and then we'll continue to write tests with Cucumber, right? So writing the tests, again, fundamentally nothing changes, right? As far as the loop arrays, those things never goes away, right? Unfortunately, what's gonna be new tools is gonna continuously get introduced, and it's not going to stop in this class. When you go to work, there's gonna be new thing tomorrow. There's gonna be some other new stuff, but they're all going to be supported by whatever platform you're using, either Java, JavaScript, Python. It doesn't matter, right? So whatever new technology comes in, pretty much they support most of the languages. If not, they will have something similar to what you are using, right? So fundamentally, don't lose your focus, right? If we don't spend some time on a certain topic, that means it's not super important, right? For me, these things are very important. Are you able to automate test cases? If you mess up on page objects here and there, it's not the end of the world, right? But if you not able to solve your problem, then we have a problem, right? Because then you're not able to contribute anywhere, right? So whenever you go into a work, you need to start contributing, right? And the only way you can contribute by solving problems. Now, is this the best optimal way of doing it? Maybe not, but no one's going to penalize you for that, right? They're getting you for cheap, so it's they're not expecting you to solve every single problem, right? Or very complex problem, but most importantly, whatever is required to do, you're able to do that. That's what our focus should be, all right? All right, so the first one was, what we wanted to do is take an array and assuming it was a sorted array. Does that make sense? And then we wanted to make sure, just to give the count, how many unique values are there, right? So if you had a value that is duplicates, that means if you have 3 duplicates of a single value, that's 1 unique value, right? So if you look at our array here, you have 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. So we have about 4 unique values here, right? Even though the length is pretty long, right? It doesn't matter how long the length of the array is, but I want to find out how many unique values are there. Make sense? Right? And I'm sure like some of you guys use hash set and all that stuff, right? Or probably done it some other ways. It's totally fine. Like as long as you solve the problem, that's what matters to me in this case. That means you're thinking, right? Like again, maybe it's not the best best approach or best way of doing it, but you know how to solve the problem. That's what's super important. So what we're doing is we're doing a quick check here. We're saying, hey, if the length equals to 0, then don't do anything, right? There's no reason to move forward. So we're quickly just checking if the length equals to 0, just return me 0, right? And I'm done with this. There's none of this code is being executed at that point. And then we are creating this local variable called I, which is setting it to 0. And then we're saying, hey, we created another loop here, right? And we set that to 1, right? And the reason because we want to kind of keep the first value at a 0 state. So we're saying, hey, if the length, as long as we know this space, right? So as long as the length is less than the length, keep incrementing 1. But here we are doing one thing. We're saying, hey, if array 0 index, right? Whatever the 0 index, in this case is 0 index, but it's going to continuously change, right? We're saying if the first index is not equal to second index in this case, then give me an I++, and whatever the second index value is, store that into the first index, right? I mean, that's going to be your new I. So you're just kind of flipping this. You gotta mess around with it a little bit, right? I know it's annoying to do this works. Like I hated it, but this is what kind of exercises your brain cells, so to speak, right? That's what the professor used to say. But everyone hates this. No one loves doing data structure algorithm-based solutions, right? But even if I go to an interview tomorrow at Google, that's what they're gonna ask me. They're not going to ask me how Selenium works. Nobody cares about that. because that tells you that you're able to think around the problem, right? At work, you're not going to do this, right? So I just wanted to kind of reiterate this. And then finally, whatever that I is, we do +1 because initial was 0, right? So whatever the I is, and then that will pretty much give us the value of how many unique values are there, all right? So we're only incrementing if it's not equal. That's the only thing you have to take away from this whole thing, right? And then we're storing, whatever that value is, we'll start the count from there now, right? Otherwise, it'll go back to 0 again. So that's that. The second, and you can try this out. I'll share this code with you. I tested this out. It was working, so that's fine. The second one was, it's not really that hard. We just I had to put a little bit of a timeout because you have to scroll. You have to give it enough time to kind of scroll, and then also to stop scrolling, right? So just to be on safe side, we probably don't have to do this after today's lecture. Once we learn how to do wherever wait functionality, right? So the very first thing, we just wanted to get the date, and the pattern was just a single D in this case, right? So for those of you who want to visualize this, so if you scroll down, right, this is what we were just trying to kind of figure this out, right? We had to put some time to make sure everything is displayed correctly. And then we cast the JavaScript executor with our driver. We scroll this amount of pixels. So 1,150 pixel looks like it gets me to time machine button, right? And then we can wrap this around better coding, right? But for now, forget it. But then we say, hey, find me an element with time machine, whatever, right? You click on it. So that's the time machine button. You click on this, and then this is the time machine date, right? So what I realized is that, and I was kind of working on this before the class. What we did is, if you right click on this, it actually gives you which date it is, right? It has something called is today, and it's always it's always selecting current date, right? So we can actually just get a class called is today, and then get that value, right? And so once we get time machine date, so this will store 10, right? And then our date format will give us 10, right? And then you just compare that. So that's pretty much it. So, if you were able to finish both, be proud of yourself. If you were to finish one, you have some work to do. If you struggle on both, you have a lot of work to do. So the whole purpose of this is to assess yourself. Like, I don't even care about the results, to be honest. I mean, how does it matter to me, right? What it matters is to where you are, and you don't come back a month later saying, hey, I'm not able to do this, right? So, because you still have time, we still have about 2 months, right? A lot of work needs to be done, but you gotta get here very soon. So if you're not able to finish at least the Selenium one, you should be able to get done, right? I'll be very disappointed if you're not able to get that done. The Java one is more of an exercise, right? How to, think about solving a problem. Are we good, Vishal? All right. You said it was hard.
I said both.
Oh, how can you?
The first time when I saw it, it was hard.
How can it be both?
It was hard at the first.
Oh, at first glance, and right away you see it.
Yeah, 30 minutes go by.
All right. The next thing that we need to learn, and this is a code you don't have to learn about. It's a little bit advanced how it's written, but you don't have to write it. That's the whole purpose. This is just to understand what it is, and then we're gonna take it and put it in our framework, and we're never gonna look at it. All right. It's very nasty. But it needed to have some work needed to be done here. Okay. There are a few types of weight that we deal with in Selenium. One is called implicit weight, which you already kind of have it with your managed library. You see what this managed library is? So we'll enable this. Do we understand why we need a weight? We need to deal with weight. And someone, right? But is it just elements all the time? It could be page. Excellent. Right? It could also be some sort of backend calls to servers. Does that make sense? So like let's say JavaScript makes a call to the server and maybe server has taking way long time to return those calls, right? So it may pretend like everything is looking correct on your web page. Does that make sense? But maybe the data is not live. Maybe that data was refreshed last night, right? So think of like transactions, like your bank transactions, which we also don't want to look at it, right? But let's say you get your transactions, and then we maybe a refresh every night, right? But now you want to kind of see the updated transaction or what may be the case. When your JavaScript fires a call to the server, that server may have to go through so many channels to give you that transaction, right? So yeah, you have a transaction that looks like it's there, but it's not really the real transaction that you're looking for. So it's very hard for you to debug that and understand that and figure those stuff out. But you don't have to put this kind of weight in every scenario. I just want you to understand that. Based on your scenario, you want to kind of protect it. Like, okay, hey, in this case, it makes a lot of server calls. Maybe I should put this type of weight here and move forward, right? So yes, elements by far the most common one, but then you have the page ones, and then you have the async calls that we just kind of talked about, right? So those ones. So let's see where we can use them, and then how we can kind of incorporate this into our framework. So you don't have to do this every time you deal with it. By default, you get through a get driver, manage class, manage, well, it's not really classes, it's kind of an object. So manage timeouts, implicit weight, and you put 10. So you see, in theory, this should have worked for every element, for everything that, what I just mentioned. But it doesn't work, right? It's not very reliable. So even if you see this, sometime it will work, sometime it's not, because it's trying to do too many things and it's not good at any of those things, right? So sometime it will work, sometime it won't work. So that's based on experience. So we won't be using that, right? You can still put that into your driver, but it's a double the work. So we won't be using implicit weight. Also, you don't have control over, all right? We can have a control over how long it should kind of wait. We don't have a control over how often it should check and when to time out. So there's not a lot of control, so to speak, that you have. Then the ones that I really want to go over is this, right? This is the most common wait function used in Selenium. What that means is it's called WebDriver Fluent Wait. It takes a locator, right? And in fact, that's when I was studying this specific function, building the framework. That's when I decided to put locator as the data type to take, right? Because that gives me a lot of room to play around with, right? From a designing perspective. So now everything kind of works hand to hand. Okay, we have the WebDriver that takes a locator. Well, I can kind of and plug that into our framework very smoothly, right? So these are the kind of questions that arises when you're building out a framework and stuff. But nevertheless, all you have to really understand here is, and don't worry about final, right? This is like I said, this is a special method, so to speak. We didn't learn these topics of how to create all of that. So therefore, I just want you to understand that we needed to have this final if you wanted to use this locator in a function methods, right? So all you need to understand, I have to pass in a locator here because ultimately that's what it's waiting for, right? Some sort of a web element value, right? And if it's not found, then you want it to do something. And then it goes through a wait object, and that takes a web driver, and then so forth. But now here is what you need to understand. At what point do you want your test to fail or timeout, right? So, I mean, you can't wait forever, right? You can probably write a script for that, but that's not the goal. Like, what point do you want? Are you satisfied with? So I thought, I mean, 15 seconds is a pretty long time, right? If an element doesn't show up in the 15 seconds, that means this is probably something wrong, right? Network is probably down, or there, the front end code is probably calling a endpoint, so to speak, that's not there, right? Oh, there could be a lot of different things can go. So 15 seconds is also pretty high, but let's just take that into account. But if you wanted to change this, you see how we using this time unit enums, right? So you can pretty much update this with anything, right? Days, hours, right? So we just make sure like it's either milliseconds or seconds is what we are kind of dealing with. But you can use any form of time intervals. So now you have duration. So with timeout would be at 15-second max. But then they're asking questions like, well, how often do you want to check, right? So what I'm saying is like, hey, go in every second and check if it's there. Go in every second. So it will check pretty much 15 times. At any point, if the element is displayed, it will perform its action and move on. It will not throw any error. It will only throw error if it reaches up to 15 seconds. Are you guys following? Right? Yes, that's being recorded. Now, during this execution, there are weird stuff happens, right? Such as no such element can pop up, stale element can exception can pop up. We're saying, hey, during that 15 seconds, the max time, just ignore this. Or, just ignore all of those errors because we understand that this can pop up. And so tomorrow, if there's a new type of exception shows up, you can just kind of add it here. Right? So you can kind of just ignoring and then add that exception here. Now you might be saying, well, Mohammed, why don't you just add the parent exception, right? Well, it's not specific again. So when an error happens, you don't know why certain things went wrong, all right? But when error does happen, what do you want your error to say? Well, whatever you want, right? So in our case, we written something like, hey, WebDriver waited for 15 seconds, but still could not find the element, therefore timeout exception has been thrown, right? So something descriptive, right? So you can do anything you want to kind of do it here. We can ignore this for now, and all it does is it returns a driver.find element and whatever the locator is. So ultimately, what you're getting back, all you have to worry about is, hey, I'm passing a locator, I'm passing a by object, and I'm getting back a web element. And then once you get your web element, you can do anything you want to do with it. Make sense? Right? What's up? No, I'm going to show you how I did it. Okay? No way. We'll just do it at one place and that's it. We're going to have to refactor our code a little bit. But nothing on your test. You're not going to see anything on your test. So let's try this out. So we're using this WebDriver find element and we're saying by ID some element ID dot click. So there is no, obviously, so ideally we should wait 15 seconds maximum. Also, no eating at 8:30 today. That's disappointing. Jishan?
Feel bad.
Just bad. Alright, so 15 seconds. We're going to just wait 15 seconds. And then, you know what I should give you guys to test this animation? That's going to be a super annoying. Right? It says, hey, WebDriver waited for 15 seconds, whatever, right? But now, if we do something like this, right? Let's just find an element. Do you guys use this tool? It's pretty cool, right? kind of, eh. We'll just click on it. Doesn't matter, right? So you see that last time when it didn't find, we gave enough time now, right? Uh, but if it does find it, the pulling is every second, and you can lower that. You can say, okay, every 250 milliseconds, right, or nanoseconds. It doesn't matter. But however you want to do this, that's totally fine. But like I say, you know, most of the time you're going to go in a place where framework is already there. Someone has taken care of this already, right? But I like everyone to kind of understand how thing works, not just like, hey, this is how it works. Go, you know, you're not gonna learn anything from there. Um, and then we have expected weight. Like I never really use these ones because this is pretty much covers this stuff. But when you look at JavaScript weight, it has a lot of weird stuff there. You see, you can find out if alert is present, attribute contains something, attributes to be, elements to be selected. It's a whole mess, right? Um, Now, we don't have to deal with all of this, but if you really run into an issue where that WebDriver weight is not working, right? It's not really making it clickable. So you can actually put another level of weight here and say, hey, weight, you have to obviously create another WebDriver weight. But again, it goes against the rule because all of this stuff is wrapped around this weight anyway, right? But if you need to use a specific one, you can use this code base expected condition and then make sure any of those things tells you true or false, right? If his alert is present, then you want to do something, right? If it's not, then you go on to other stuff. Is elements to be selected, elements to, it's just a lot of garbage there, right? So honestly, I never use any of this stuff because once you kind of figure out the fluent weight, pretty much works for all of them, right? But if you wanted to see if element is clickable after a certain point, right? So maybe uh, you have an element, right? And you perform some action on this web page, and based on what you did, some element should be clickable or not, right? If you have to do that, I wouldn't even use that because at that point you can probably get attribute of all of the elements because it will say clickable equals to true or something like that. So it might still have a native attribute, but if not, you can probably use this, right? Um, we talked about the page load, right? Like I said, it will probably be embedded into the framework. You probably will not even know where it is, but this is how we use page load. You get driver, page element, time use, page load time. So if it doesn't load within 30 seconds, it's going to throw an error. All right. This is the asynchronized scripts that I talked about, async. So in JavaScript, there's something called async. Is that, did we talk about async? A little bit, right? So, async is like, for example, when you go to movies, right? What happens? You wait in one line and one after another. Everyone kind of gets in slowly, right? But async is slightly different. It's pretty amazing, right? But it's like, let's say, think of like a restaurant, right? Everyone makes an order, right? But whichever food gets done first, that's what you know. So the waiters keep bringing food in, taking order. So there is no sort of like sequential order, right? It's pretty dynamic. So in JavaScript, when we're developing softwares, we make async calls as well to the server. But sometimes we want to make sure all of the async calls is completed before we start our testing. Because like I said, some element could return some values right away. Some may take longer, right? So, and that goes with all these travel sites, if you really think about it, right? When a travel site makes a call to, let's say, Delta or American Express or the hotels, right? We may getting data from so many different sources, right? in that case, we have to make an async call. But just because one source didn't get resolved, we shouldn't stop everybody else, right? So since you're dealing with a web page, like I said, we may think these are simple web pages. They're not websites. They're web applications and requires tons of money, super expensive to build. So a lot of the crazy technology under the hood we need to take account for, right? So if you're running into a lot of those asynchronous script errors, right, you might want to use that weight as well, right? What's up?
What's the difference between a page load weight and the implicit weight?
Well, implicit weight I think works with the elements, right? And page load deals with the page itself, right? But I could be wrong. You can look for definition maybe online, but I think that's what it is, right? Any other questions? What's up?
How would you know when to use asynchronous?
Well,
is it the
you're
error?
you're going to start seeing errors and stuff like that, right? But you're probably going to say asynchronous script unresolved or some error. Like I haven't run into like that very often, but there was one time kind of ran into years ago. But like I said, even the JavaScript developers who's writing these scripts, they're very thoughtful about how these scripts supposed to come back, right? So they might not even show anything unless all of it is resolved, right? So it depends how your web application behaves, and when something like that happens, like I said, someone senior is going to take care of this for time being until you become that senior person, right? So, but for now, you know at least which direction to go. When you see async related errors, okay, hey, let me put this, and it may not still work, right? But at least you have something to kind of move forward with, and at least ask the right question at Google, right? So that's also important. And I also think we should do a class on how to search for answer in Google, right? Like Google can help you a lot once you know stuff, right? Google cannot teach you and solve a problem for you, right? I just want you to understand that. Like if you don't know Java, there's nothing they can do, right? But if you know everything, see, like something like this, right? So now you know about asynchronous kind of errors. Now you can say, hey, how to do async wait in Selenium. That makes sense. Whereas if you search for how to wait in Selenium, right? That's totally two different things. Now it's coming tutorials and guru.com and all that. Right? So now it's trying to teach you everything from scratch. So and also learn how to read engineering documentation, which is like let's say Selenium docs and things like that. You gotta learn how to read those, understand those. It's very important because most of the time you're going to read a lot. All right. So that covers all of the weight stuff. Okay, so that leads to our base page, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll start on other stuff. So nothing special here. All I did is I created this web action. It's the same thing as what you saw here, right? Nothing different. But I wanted to incorporate it into a base page. And you see how it takes a locator? All I did was, let's say if I wanted to click on something now, right? Because we were clicking on this get driver dot find element, we pass in the element as a by object, right? And then we say what? Click. But this is not wrapped around with the fluent wait, right? So if you ever click on it and if it doesn't find an element, it's just going to do this garbage implicit wait and it's not going to work, right? But how do we wrap this around our fluent wait? Actually, so what you want to do is you want to get rid of this. Ultimately, what it matters is, well, it's returning a web element and it's taking a locator. We are passing a locator here, right? And since it's going to return me a web element, I could just perform an action, right? So we say web action expects what? A locator, which we already have here, right? And it's called, we are calling it element in this case. And then you just do a click. Since it returns a web element, right? You can perform any action to a web element like click, send keys, and so forth. Make sense? Good. So so now, how do we do this one? Well, pretty simple, right? Web action. We pass in the locator, and then dot send keys, and we pass in the value. But look at the beauty of this. You're not changing any of your tests anymore, right? So if you're wondering why we do page object, imagine you did like vanilla Selenium, so to speak, like whatever they gave us, and we use click everywhere, right? Like thousands of places. How would you make that change, right? And if you tell your manager, hey, I need next 3 months, like, right? We'll do the same thing here. We'll do web actions, element, um, get text. So none of your tests has to change. We are just kind of making this refactoring at a root level and a base page level, right? Any questions? Okay, we'll take a quick break. Once you're back, we're going to work on behavior-driven development, which is the cucumber portion of it, right? And then you guys will have, some readings and stuff to do.
Can you open this height? This for web element equals
Where?
before the return.
Right here?
Yeah. It's showing to height. Can you push the plus?
Oh,
Yes,
plus.
yeah. You will share this document.
Maybe. How you doing, Mohammed? Let's start, guys. Yeah, I am. Okay, so this is, I mean, this is how you guys been writing test cases. What is a test case? To like, just to refresh, a long time ago we learned about this.
Steps where you go to validate something.
All right, so there are certain steps to make sure the business requirement is kind of met, and test cases is how you carry out those um, actions, right? So it's kind of like a sequential order of actions that you perform, and then you're done with it, right? Now, this is a very simple one, which isn't too bad. But what if there is a test case with 25 steps, right? It's hard to kind of just repeat them over and over and over, right? So we need to simplify this. Not that this is wrong or anything like that. It's just more work. So that's when a new concept calls behavior-driven development shows up. And just leave this test case up front right now, and we're going to refactor this. We're going to refactor with BDD approach in a little bit, but for now, let's assume this is how we write test cases. And if you go back to our second or third class, we've written some test cases. If you can, right after this, you can start pulling them out and write them in BDD for the classwork after this. All right. So what is behavior? I mean, we're just going to go high level. Like I say, you're going to have some reading materials to read about it, but I want to prep you a little bit. So what is behavior-driven development? It's an agile software development technique that encourages collaboration between devs, QA, non-technical member in a software. It doesn't really explain a lot in this, right? I mean, we do collaborate regardless if it's BDD or not. So I guess what is behavior-driven concept of software development plus testing? So we want to focus on development and testing, in a very team manner, so to speak, right? The both team kind of works with each other. They're both building the same, devs are building the right thing, testers are testing the right thing. There is no miscommunication, so to speak. And BDD believes like they have that right approach to kind of solve that, right? But before we go into BDD, let's just talk about test-driven development. So there was another development. Some engineering manager, uses this approach where they write the test first. So instead of writing the requirement for following the requirement, they're writing the test. So you're saying, hey, if all the test passes, then the requirement is met. But that's not always the case, right? And it's it's time consuming, and also, like, what I've learned and what I think is the best way to, lead a team is that you should put people who's good at whatever they does. Like, you should just, if someone's really good at engineering something, they shouldn't be managing, right? We want to utilize them on the right base. If someone's really good, like a people person, can speak in public, can get things done, they should be the manager, right? But if that person is a really good engineer, then he should be writing code, right? So my philosophy with this is wrong is because then you're forcing maybe a very top-notch engineer to write test, right? And there's nothing wrong with writing a test, but are you willing to pay $300K a year to someone to write tests for you, right? I mean, it's just not a good investment, right? So that approach doesn't work. So we want devs to work on future. We want testing to work on testing, right? They're both equally obviously important, right? But there are some complex stuff. Certain people have very special skills to kind of do those things, right? So you want them to work on those features instead of focusing on writing tests and passing them. So TDD works for some teams, but again, it's totally depend on who's the manager, who's the director. They probably have a really good experience with TDD, and they might apply it, right? So those are some of the teams that likes to use that. Like I said, tests are written in plain descriptive English grammar. Tests are explained as user behavior and user focus. Requirement are specified as examples. So this is kind of difference between a TDD example and BDD example, right? If you look at test-driven tests, which we've been doing, right? Assert equals, and then you put two values. It doesn't really describe a lot of things, right? We know it now because we've been working on it. But here, anyone can read this. We can say, hey, count should be 5, right? Instead of saying assert equals count 5, like that doesn't really so it's more discrete, but they're both doing the same thing, right? But this looks a little bit, a little bit more descriptive, so to speak, right? Does that make sense, guys? Right? So our test should be written in this format, well, our step definition, so to speak. Um, So let's assume there's a requirement from a client for an e-commerce website. Client wants to build a new feature for better user experience. Client hires an agency to help build this. Well, this is a good idea, but the challenge is that person who is developing the idea is not the same person with the idea, right? That's most of the cases, right? People who come up with who has the idea of building something, they're never the person. It's like, even if you're doing construction at home, you want to change a few things, but you don't do it, right? Most of the time, right? Usually you kind of hire somebody to kind of get the work done and so forth, right? It's the same thing with software. That's what pretty much we're saying. Um, when devs are writing a test against their code, there are some scenarios that could be missed. Where do I begin to develop? What exactly should I test? How should tests be structured and name IDs? All of those questions kind of rises. It's hard to determine those things, right? Um, and then comes BDD. We can kind of go into. Why is this lagging? Okay. There are some reading materials you can kind of read through, but most importantly, describe user behavior of your software in a very understanding way. So you describe your behavior, and then you write your step definitions, right? And then you run your test, and it should fail, right? Very first time you write your step definition, because there's nothing written in it, right? Write the code to make a step pass and run and pass all your tests. So it kind of goes, so instead of writing a test case, so to speak, you're writing a behavior, right? And then that behavior needs to be supported by some Java code, right? Which is going to be our step definition. That's where you write all your logics and stuff like that. And then you go through these steps, over and over. And something kind of looks like this. So if you look at the facebook.com, scenario would be login with valid credentials, and then you see some tags here, right? Given I am on the login page, when I fill in email, right? And then also pass it. We can also pretty much abstract all of that, and I should be in the user homepage, and I should see a login. So this is more detailed sort of scenario, but we can break this into 2-3 sentences, right? So anyone can understand this when they're reading it, right? Given pretty much a setup steps, and we're gonna go over this real quick. So this whole approach of using these keywords, these are called Gherkin's language, right? So, Gherkins are like those small cucumbers, if you're wondering, right? And so then these are, and the whole technology is supported by something called Cucumber, right? So you have Cucumber here, right? So a framework that supports BDD executes your .future files, and those files contain specification written in language called Gherkins, right? So the whole technology of BDD is implemented in programming world is by a platform called Cucumber, right? And we use, instead of, you see how I'm using this text file, or if you were to write a test case in Jira or Excel, instead of that, you're writing your test cases now in something called .future file, right? You know how you have .class file, which is a Java file, or if it's .js file, it's a JavaScript file. Well, now you have something called .future file where you write your test cases, right? And then we will take that test case and then write. We'll write a glue code for that, which is the step definitions, right? And that step definition will drive each of those steps, so to speak, right? And we'll get there. That's what you're gonna work on the rest of the way. So, if you don't understand this stuff, it's totally fine because you can't get away from it. And like I said, all these languages like given, when, then, these are your. So again, Gherkin language written in plain text that is human readable, helps all stakeholders to understand about the software without going into technical details. So here could be one scenario where every scenario consists of list of steps which must start with one of the keywords given, when, then, but, or and, right? And I will explain each one of those. Cucumber treats them all the same, but you shouldn't here. But you shouldn't, right? Obviously, here is an example. You look at this future. Future will be obviously what your high-level test scenarios are, right? So let's think of, if you look at Amazon, you have search, orders, payments. So that could be your high levels, what you're trying to accomplish in that specific future. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to test all the serve coffee scenario, right? In this case, you're saying, hey, coffee should not be served until paid for. Coffee should not be served until the button has been pressed. If there is no coffee left, then money should be refunded, right? So here's the scenario. Buy the last coffee, given there are one coffee left in the machine. So given is sort of like a setup code, right? That's what I have to set this. This is my starting point. Without this, I can't test this scenario. And I have deposited, let's say, $1. I press the coffee button, I should be served the coffee, right? So even if you have a last coffee, you should be able to whatever the scenario is. But the main thing, what you really need to take away here is that you have a given step, you have an and step, and you have a when and then. And replaces subsequent Gherkin steps. So let's say you have a two given, right? If you say given there and then you say given again, it doesn't make sense, right? It will work the same, but when someone is reading it, it's not that friendly, right? So whereas whenever you get a two-step that is duplicating, the second anything after the second step should be and. Replace it with and. So in this case, under the hood, this is a given, right? But and would make it more readable, right? When is an actions, whenever you're performing an action. So, like I said, given is more like a prereq, things that you need to set up before you do anything. In our case, for Facebook, we could say, given I am at homepage. Does that make sense? How do I get to homepage? It doesn't matter, right? Given I am logged out. Maybe you want to do something at a logged out screen. And you don't want to keep saying, go to URL, log in with these details, right? Go to homepage, click on logout button. I don't care about all that. We can abstract all of that and just focus on what are you really trying to test here, right? So we're not trying to test one coffee left in the machine or things like that. We just want to set this up so we can test our scenario, which is to buy the last coffee from the machine. So whens are actions, and you can have multiple whens as well. You can click on one button, then you may have to fill out a form, and then you have to click on another button. So if you're doing that, and as soon as you catch yourself doing too many steps, take a step, right? Hold up, and then try to come up with a sentence that can abstract all of it, right? So it's easier for someone to understand. And then finally, you said, then I should be served coffee. So when you press the coffee button, you should be served coffee. So then is a verification step. So then should be your last step, or maybe number of last steps, right? So you can have, maybe when you press the coffee button, you should be served coffee, and also there should be another step that says out of stock, right? Or refill. So one action can lead to multiple verifications, right? It's not just one-to-one each time, right? You must have at least one verification to understand what happened. But you can have multiple verification, just like in this case, when you press the coffee button and the coffee is served, and you should also get some sort of notification saying out of stock, right? Or like a blinker or whatever may be the case. So you have to verify all of those things. So like a refunding, another scenario could be Robin returns a faulty bicycles. Robin has bought a bicycle for 500. He held on to his receipt and he returns the bicycle and he should be refunded with $500, right? So that's how you're writing your test cases now, as simple as possible. Here it describes a little bit more about what given, when, and then, and so let's go over them. Scenario should be titled. There is no Java code behind it. It doesn't really do anything. It's just for a descriptive reason. Then you have given, which is your initial conditions, a prereq or setup code, right? Whatever, a setup step. What the software will look like to the user when the testing starts, and then when is the things that user will do, like actions. So drag and drop, or filling out a form, or analyzing a graph. Like these are things that you are kind of performing. Then would be something you see, right? You verify. So your last step should be usually then. I don't like to do test given, when, then again. That means you're kind of like, if you guys remember like run-on sentences like you're in English classes, right? I still do that, but it's just like you're trying to do too much in one sentence, right? Same thing with this test case. Don't try to do too much with one test case. Have an objective, like a simple objective, one goal, and accomplish that, and go back and write another test scenario to, solve that problem. And yeah, so far, expect what the user should expect at that point. So in this case, right, you have your description of the scenario. Given is the context, the first precondition, and then you may have a more. You have to have another precondition that has to happen, right? So and more additional preconditions. So as soon as you have an additional steps, right, you might want to replace that with and you can have multiple. You can have 3, 4. But well, if it's 4, then we are maybe writing something wrong, right? We may have to go and think about to abstract that, right? So coding is all about analyzing, abstracting, and when to abstract, when not to abstract, so to speak, right? If you abstract too much, where nothing makes sense, right? And if you abstract, and if you don't abstract at all, and someone looks at your test case, nobody wants to read it. If it's 15 steps, I promise you, no one's gonna read it. It's just not gonna be good. And then when would be your actions? Again, you can have multiple actions, but if you have multiple action, anything from second one should be replaced with and. So and is kind of like a replaced tag, so to speak, right? So that's that. We'll talk about what a future file is. We can skip that for now. We can skip all of that. All right. We'll do all of this when we are actually implementing it. So now, let's see if we can simplify this. So we have our scenario, which is fine. And we'll say verify again. So this is where our setup step given. I am on. I don't know if we do this, but let's do it. Landing page, right? So we don't do that. As a default user, and we can store that user somewhere, right? Don't worry about that one now. So when I log in as default user, well, when I log in as invalid user, right? And we can pretty much create a map with all the different type of users, right? Valid users, invalid users, user who expires tomorrow, user who's, you know what I mean? Like all of those, that could be an object itself, right? And under the hood, we can figure this out, right? So nothing is exposed at all. And then I verify invalid login error message. You see? So in this case, you might say, well, you're not really saving a lot, which is whatever, but think about like 15 steps or 20 steps, right? You got to bring it down to 4 to 5 steps. That's the whole plan. Any questions so far? Is that good? Okay, so what we can do now is, if we can pull out all those test cases that we have written, right, and see if you can convert that. But meantime, I want you to do something. And we can share some. You can share some with me, and we can do it together, so you can understand your mistakes maybe, and then we can take it from there. Because starting next class, we're gonna start on this stuff. I'm sharing a link where you can get more details about this. There's this 10 minutes tutorial on this, but it's not really 10 minutes more. But don't worry about this part. What I want you to study is go to BDD and kind of read about so read about BDD a little bit, read about Cucumber, like we're gonna do all of those things, right? So I want you to read, get confused a little bit, and then once you come back, we're gonna clean it up by going through the framework, right? But what happens is when you read something, when you come to class, you're gonna have some idea of what's happening, right? The idea is not okay, you read it and you understand it and you implement it, right? That's not the goal at this stage of your career. That's gonna happen very soon. But for now, I just want you to kind of read, get some understanding of it. And once you come into class, we're gonna go through end to end. So read about step definition, all of these things, right? Behavior-driven development, Gherkins, what a Gherkins is, and all of that stuff. And see if you can get all of your old test cases and see if you can convert those into Gherkins and Cucumber format. Make sense? Any questions so far? All right. So write those. And in fact, if you want to work this as a group, that's fine with me. This is something you can work as a group and come up with like 3-4 scenarios, and let's review them in half an hour and fix some of those. Any questions from online? Deepak, are we good? Okay. I'm recording now.
Yeah, now.
Yeah. Okay, I want to go over one more thing. Actually, we have time for GitHub, so let's do this. He's wearing a jacket, and you're asking for AC?
He's always wearing it. It's perpetual winter.
See, the weather here blue different.
All right, guys, let's focus. So when you think of, how many guys understand what a GitHub is? Okay, besides you, we went over this. Okay, what is it about?
I think GitHub is a place where everybody just uploads their code. It's like a repository where all the developers they just put up their code, and from there the other people can pull and download the code onto their own.
That's yeah. That's okay. Well, I'll give you two examples, right? So when you store photos, right, you have an option to store it on the device, on your phone itself, or you have an option to store it on cloud, right? If you upload it in cloud, you can go to any country and pull it down. As long as you have access to your cloud, which is the username and password. If you trust somebody else, you can also give them this credential, and they can also pull it out. The same thing goes with let's take another step forward. When I gave you guys those links to download these videos, right? I'm uploading it to Google Cloud, and you're able to download it, or also you can upload something and share it with me, right? It's more convenient. So I don't know if it's a safe thing to do, but it's a very convenient thing to do, right? Now, well, code is no different, right? But it's a little bit complex, so to speak. How we can push is not just like uploading an image, right? So when we are working on our system so far, every piece of code that you have written, you saved it local to your machine. So if this machine was damaged, you're pretty much done with it. Make sense, right? But that's not the main reason why obviously we put it into code. You're never going to work by yourself in a team, right? You're always going to work in it with other engineers, and you may be working on sign up where someone else might be working on payments. But you both have to kind of push the code into the same repo, so because that's your kind of the parent of all, the source of all of the code base, right? So everyone kind of work on their own branches, so to speak, but it's the same tree, right? Everyone has to merge into the same source directory, right? So how do we do that? So you have your local, so everything, your working directory is pretty much what you're working on. When you add this, it goes to the staging area, and then when you do a commit, staging area kind of like, okay, this is your working directory, and then you decide which files you want to add, push it to the cloud, right? In this case, we will stage that. Once you do git add, we're staging, okay, hey, I worked on 5 different files, but I'm only going to merge 3, right? Because this is the 3 files that matters to me right now, right? We'll stage them, and then once you decide that, we will commit them, right? And once we commit it, it stores on your local repo, right? So it's slightly different than your directory. It's kind of your local repository, right? And then we push this local repository to your remote repository, right? Which is any type of, and GitHub is not the only company that provides this. You have GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, bunch of other crap, right? But these are the ones. GitHub is by far the most popular one, right? And it's free. But the free means everyone can see your work. Okay. Private, it costs $7 a month, right? But don't worry about that. Right now, it's not a concern. So what you have to do is we're gonna have to learn how to do all these different things, which is the most annoying part, right? And so let's say you git push, you push all your code there. So let's say now Gia decides to go and push some other stuff, right? Now I don't have that. So at that point, I can do a git pull and get what he has, what he just pushed into. So the master has everyone's code, right? And then every time you do a git pull, you will have that available for you as well. And that's when you do git checkout, git merge, and all that stuff. So when you git pull, when you pull all your code back in, now let's say on a file XYZ in line number 15, he made some changes, but I also made some changes on the same file on the same line. So that's called merge conflicts. So when that happens, there is a big problem, right? Because now the code cannot make a decision which one is the right code, right? That's when you have to interact with Jia and say, hey, which one are we keeping here? Am I keeping on my code, or and it might be both of them could be valid. So one of you have to push your code down and say, hey, because you might be working on something else, and I may be working, and it usually happens with page objects, right? You're working on a feature where you introduced a new element, or someone else working on the same feature, working on some other element, but they both happen to be on the same line. And when you clash it, it doesn't know how to decide it, but you can keep all of it, right? Or you can keep one of it. Maybe he also had to do submit, Risha also had to do submit. You don't want to keep two locators, right? As long as we get rid of one of them, totally fine. So these are called merge conflicts, right? But do we all kind of high level understand this workflow? All right, good. Now, right. So everyone, if you can go to github.com and sign up, that would be awesome. And then we'll take it from there. Actually, you can sign up. Let's go through the installation phase, right? That's actually important right now. So two things you need to have. You need to have an account in GitHub website, like github.com, right? Once you have your account, just leave that alone for now. And then I want everyone to do this. Open your terminal.
You want us to make the account first?
No, don't worry about that now, right? So let's just open your terminal first and type ls-al, right? Tilde /.ssh. You want me to share this? I can do that. Do you see something like ID underscore RSA? Probably not. Good, good. That's good. If you don't see that, it's good.
Hey, do I have to create a new SSH?
No, you're good. You don't have to do anything.
Okay.
You can help somebody. You can help. You can help her.
Oh, yes.
So, I didn't know why you volunteered. All right. So chances are you don't have that, right? So run the second step from there. You see where it says SSH. Copy this piece and just update your email address here, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. I could leave my email address too. All it makes it like more unique. So you just copy this and paste it back here. I'm not going to run it because I already have it, so I don't want it to override it.
You want us to put your email or?
No, your email. That's fine. Nirmal, are you following?
Yeah.
Everyone done? Just do keep entering. Don't do anything. Yeah. Just keep hitting return button.
Password.
No. Don't no password. Just return button. So that's perfect. So just keep hitting return button. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Don't put anything. Yeah. Just keep doing it. Yeah. Up until that QR code. Yeah, that's fine. No. Once you get to that. Yeah. Good. Yeah, enter it. All right. You guys are here. Oh, here's Windows. Good luck now. All right.
Enter.
Yeah. So after that, go back to the same command now. ls-al.
So I could create it, but
Because you might have a different command. Yeah, but for you, it's okay. Because I have to give you an Yeah, okay. Guys, everyone here? Everyone who has Mac?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then once you get here, you have your GitHub account, right?
Can we create an account?
You don't have it? All right. Let's just follow it, and then once you understand it, you can kind of do it, right? So on your GitHub account, you go here, and actually not here. You go to settings, and you see the SSH. Okay. So what we are trying to do is, guys, when you push code to your GitHub account, GitHub host wants to understand that you're the right person. Does that make sense? So to build this bridge or tunnel, the secure tunnel, so to speak, they'll want something from your computer, which is that code, one of the code, right? So then when you push your code there, you don't have to keep logging in every time. Otherwise, they're going to force you to keep doing HTTPS way, right? So now we are doing an SSH way, which is like a secure tunnel that we are building, right? So for us to do this, we have to give them some sort of a unique code that we just generated them, right? So the way you do this, you just say more. Now there's two codes. You have a public one that finishes with .pub, and then the ones that's left empty. you do not want to share this with anyone, because then we can access, someone can remotely access you, right? So just make sure you're only allowed to share the public one, all right? So what we do is, now we have to speed out what's inside of it, right? Because we don't know what's inside of that file. So that key, we have to type something like this. And like I said, this is like, there are a lot of tutorials on YouTube. So if you're not able to get it right away, it's always there. So you do this, and now it will speed out this unique key. What you will do is, you see where the copy SSH starts from? You'll go all the way up until the last value, which is the IO or whatever, right? In my case, is IO. For you, it could be gmail.com or whatever. You copy this, and you go here and you create something called new SSH, right? I'm not going to do it, but you can say my Mac or personal Mac, because you might have another Mac for work, right? Or computer. So you'll paste that here. You'll do add SSH. Now you build that bridge between those two, from your computer to your account. Make sense? All right.
I get
So you still have to copy the code, right?
Yes, you have to copy that and paste it in GitHub. Now I'm recording this. You don't have to do it now, right? You can go home and do it. All right. So once you're done with this, look, there is I can send you a link too. Actually, there is a link there, setting up SSH on GitHub. All right, guys, let's go through last few steps. These are recorded, so you should be fine. Now, how can we actually clone and make commits and make changes and all that stuff, right? So very first thing you want to do when you go there, you hit the new repository, right? And we'll just say demo 2019. All right. So I have option for private, but in your case, if you want to pay for it, that's fine. But what we want to do, initialize this repository with README. This is just a file where you can update, information about your projects, how to set it up, how to run it. But for now, we're just going to have an empty file, and then we'll say create repository. Once you did this, right, now things get a little bit easier because we have the SSH linkage, right? We have to clone this project. Always create a project in GitHub. Don't create a project on your local, try to push it. It's a little bit tedious, right? It's gonna give you more problems. If you're going to work on a new project, go to GitHub, create the project there, and now we're going to clone it. Make sure it says clone with SSH. Sometimes what happens, it says clone with HTTPS. But in our case, we are going to use the SSH. And then you copy this link. So we just made the copy. And now you would like to clone it somewhere, right? So we'll do it in desktop. So I cd to desktop. And I say git clone, right? And then paste that link. And I just got it cloned, right? So now, when I open my desktop, new Finder window, right here. You see how demo 299, and I have that git, right? So that's how we are able to do this. Now, let's make some changes, right? How do we make some changes? And that's what we're going to be pretty much doing. All right. So let's say demo 2019-99, update it. Guys, this is very important, so you might want to follow this. So once we do this, so we made some changes to the project we just created in GitHub, then cloned it in our machines, and so we can say run a command called git status. By the way, I have all this documented, so it's not something you can kind of just go through this. That's all I'm doing pretty much. So we say git status. I'm saying I'm not in the project, obviously, right? So I'm going to go into the project city demo 2019, right? So that's where my project is. I go in there, and now if I say git status, and it's telling me, hey, this is the file I have modified. But in this case, we just modified a single file, right? So that's the one. And I'm acknowledging it by saying, okay, hey, I understand, but I want you to add this. What this does is git add dot means stage all of the file I just made changes to, right? So if you have 5 files and all of them, you don't have to individually go through each one. But in this case, since we have one file and this is the one I want to add, I can just say git dot add all of it. And now if you run git status again, it's at a staging stage, right? So if we go back to our image, so we did the git add, and now we are at a staging area, right? But we have not committed anything. We say, okay, well, you know what? Now we say, okay, well, git commit m. So you give some message. What are you committing here, right? So we say initial demo commit, something that's descriptive. In your case, you might say, oh, added or refactor the existing login locators, right? Or added a sign up scenario, something that is relevant to what you're committing. Once you do this, now we have our git commit. You will say git push underscore u origin master. What we are doing here is now by default everyone is working on master branch, which is fine. And from now, just learn how to work on master branch, and then we can learn how to create future branch, and then merge them into master. But for now, just work with single branch. So we're saying git push under dash u origin master, where you're telling your GitHub in your Git compiler is that, hey, push all this code to remote master branch. All right. So when we do this, all right, that's it. So if we go here now and refresh this, and look, README has this thing, right? Update from Mohammed. So now you can go to my account and pretty much clone this, and you would have that, and you can do something else with that, right? So that's what all they all say, like, oh, you can fork something and then work on any project, right? So even you can work on Selenium projects and all of that. Like, these are all open source projects now, so anyone should be able to work on any project. Any questions so far? So what I want you to do going home is that get this working, create a new project, push some stuff there, right? Maybe going forward, all your homework, for each homework, or you don't have to create new projects, but all your new homework, start to work on GitHub. All submission must be done through GitHub. That's the only way you can learn it. All right? Any questions?
Everybody must call it